world around you from your various senses: seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, and touching. It handles your physical movement when walking, talking, standing, or sitting. It lets you think, dream, reason, and experience emotions. All of these tasks are coordinated, controlled, and regulated by an organ that is about the size of a small head of cauliflower. Your brain, spinal cord, and peripheral nerves make up complex and integrated information processing and control system known as your central nervous system. In tandem, they regulate all of the conscious and unconscious facets of your life. The scientific study of the brain and the nervous system is called neuroscience or neurobiology. Because the field of neuroscience is so vast and the brain and nervous system are so complex, this article will start with the basics and give you an overview of this complicated organ. We'll examine the structures of the brain and how each section controls our daily functions, including motor control, visual processing, auditory processing, sensation, learning, memory, and emotions. Neuron structure. So these are the actual brain cells in your brain. There's a great little diagram here. It goes along with the diagram you have in your packet. Neuron structure. Your brain is made of approximately 100 billion nerve cells called neurons. Neurons have the amazing ability to gather and transmit electrochemical signals. Think of them like gates and wires in a computer. Neurons share the same characteristics and have the same makeup as other cells, but the electrochemical aspect lets them transmit signals over long distances, up to several feet or a few meters, and send messages to each other. Neurons have three basic parts: a cell body, or a soma. This main part has all of the necessary components of the cell, such as the nucleus, which contains the cell's DNA, the endoplasmic reticulum, and ribosomes for building proteins, and the mitochondria for making energies. If the cell body dies, the neuron dies. The axon. This long cable-like projection of the cell carries the electrochemical message or nerve impulse or action potential along the length of the cell. Depending on the type of neuron, axons can be covered with a thin layer of myelin, like an insulated electrical wire. Myelin is made of fat and protein, and it helps speed the transmission of a nerve impulse down a long axon. Myelinated neurons are typically found in the peripheral nerves, or sensory and motor neurons. So these are the neurons that help your body move. While non-myelinated neurons are found in the brain and the spinal cord. Dendrites, or nerve endings. These small branch-like projections of the cell make connections to other cells and allow the neuron to talk with other cells or perceive the environment. Dendrites can be located on one or both ends of a cell. Basic neuron types. Neurons come in many sizes. For example, a single sensory neuron from your fingertip has an axon that extends the length of your arm. That's cool, isn't it? Look at your arm and think about that there's a cell in your fingertip and the axon of that cell extends the length of your arm. While neurons in the brain may extend only a few millimeters, that tiniest little line on a metric ruler. They also have different shapes depending on their functions. Motor neurons that control muscle contractions have a cell body at one end and a long axon in the middle and dendrites at the other end. Sensory neurons have dendrites on both ends, connected by a long axon with a cell body in the middle. Interneurons, or associative neurons, carry information between motor and sensory neurons. So, like their names hint at, the motor neurons help you move. Sensory neurons are going to help you sense. So think about all of those senses. Okay, and that's how that information gets passed up and down your body. When something tickles, when something hurts, sensory neuron. These fundamental members of the nervous system also vary with respect to their functions. Here you go. Sensory neurons carry signals from the outer parts of your body, the periphery, the edges, to the central nervous system. Motor neurons carry signals from the central nervous system to the outer parts, muscles, skin, and glands of your body. Interneurons connect various neurons with the brain and the spinal cord. The simplest type of neural pathway is a mono, meaning one, single, as you can see, monosynaptic reflex pathway, so a single connection. Like the knee jerk reflex, when the doctor taps the right spot on your knee with a rubber handle, receptors send a signal into the spinal cord through a sensory neuron. The sensory neuron passes the message to a motor neuron that controls your leg muscles. Nerve impulses travel down the motor neuron and stimulate the appropriate muscle to contract. The response is a muscular jerk that happens quickly and does not involve your brain. So it just goes to your spinal cord and back, does not go up to your brain. Humans have a lot of hardwired reflexes like this, but as tasks become more complex, the pathway circuitry gets more complicated and the brain gets involved. The brain parts. The simplest possible creatures have incredibly basic nervous systems made up of nothing but reflex pathways. For example, flatworms and invertebrates don't have centralized brains. They have loose associations of neurons arranged in straightforward reflex pathways. Flatworms have neural nets, or individual neurons linked together that form a net around the entire animal. Most invertebrates, such as the lobster, have modest brains that consist of localized collections of neuronal cell bodies called ganglia. Each ganglion controls sensory and motor functions in its segment through reflex pathways, and the ganglia are linked together to form a simple nervous system. As nervous systems evolved, chains of ganglia evolved into more centralized, simple brains. Brains evolved from ganglia of invertebrates, regardless of the animal brains, have the following parts. The brainstem, which consists of the medulla, an enlarged portion of the upper spinal cord, pons and midbrain. Lower animals only have a medulla. The brainstem controls the reflexes and the autonomic functions. Automatic. The heart rate, the blood pressure, limb movements, and visceral functions, digestion and urination. Those things that happen in your body without you thinking about it. So breathing could be on that list as well. The cerebellum integrates information from the vestibular system that indicates position and movement and uses this data to coordinate limb movements. The hypothalamus and the pituitary gland are responsible for visceral functions, body temperature, and behavioral responses such as feeding, drinking, aggression, and pleasure. The cerebellum, also called the cerebral cortex or just the cortex, consists of the cortex, large fiber tracts, known as the corpus callosum, and some deeper structures, basal ganglia, amygdala, and the hippocampus. It integrates info from all the sense organs, initiates motor functions, controls emotion, and holds memory and thought processes. Emotional expression and thinking are more prevalent in higher mammals. How your brain works. Brains for instinct. Lower animals such as fish, amphibians, reptiles, and birds don't do much thinking, but instead concern themselves with everyday business of gathering food, eating, drinking, sleeping, reproducing, and defending themselves. These are instinctual processes. Therefore, their brains are organized along the major centers that control these functions. We humans perform these functions as well, and so have a, quote, reptilian brain built into us. This means we have the same parts of the brain found in reptiles, namely the brainstem and the cerebellum. And you'll remember from the other page that the brainstem pretty much takes care of all of those things for us. Oftentimes, if there's direct damage to the brainstem, that injury is fatal because it controls the heartbeat and the blood pressure, those things that there's no way, even if you were awake and wanted to change you, that you can. Okay, let's learn about the lower brain.